Blind old man guides a crying teen through a burning building. Her father's reaction was priceless. The fire was everywhere, hot, furious, alive. Her screams vanished into the chaos until an old, trembling voice whispered, "Take my hand. I know the way." Smoke clung to every breath Ava took as she stumbled through the second floor of the burning building. The heat was merciless, and her lungs clawed for air. She had no idea where her father was, no idea how she even got separated from him during their frantic escape. All she knew was that the world had turned into flames, and she was going to die alone. Until he appeared. At first, she thought he was a hallucination blur of a man emerging from the smoke, a silhouette bent by time. His hair was white, ash coating his shoulders, and he wore a faded navy sweater that looked older than she was. His eyes, though open, were clouded. They didn't move, didn't focus. "You're blind," she stammered through sobs. "And you're lost," he replied calmly. "We can help each other." His hand reached out. Ava hesitated. Somewhere in her panic, her instincts screamed not to trust a stranger, especially one who couldn't even see. But another part of her, the part that had grown up watching her father serve in the fire department, whispered louder, "Bravery doesn't always look like you expect." She grabbed his hand, and he walked forward firmly, deliberately as if he'd memorized every inch of the building with his feet. "I used to live here," he said quietly. "Long time ago. I still remember." The corridor groaned beneath them. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Ava clutched his hand tighter. "What's your name?" she asked, coughing. "Walter," he said. "Keep low. There's a stairwell just ahead." He was right. Somehow, impossibly, he was right. Ava ducked beneath a falling beam and followed the man's lead, her sobs slowly transforming into breathless determination. Walter moved without hesitation. His hands swept the air like a conductor leading a silent orchestra, his feet never stumbling. And all the while, he spoke to her, to himself, to the walls perhaps. "I used to run through here with my son," he murmured. "The banisters loose careful. The steps dip on the left side." "Why are you here?" she asked. "To remember," he said. "To forget. Maybe both." They made it to the stairwell. Smoke spiraled downward like a curtain of death. "I can't go in there," she said, backing up. "It's too thick, I can't breathe." Walter squeezed her hand. "You can. I'll count the steps. Just hold on to the railing. One step at a time." She followed. 10 steps. 20. 30. Each one felt like it would be the last. But then, through the haze, she saw it light. Not firelight, but sunlight. The bottom floor. And outside her father. He was screaming her name, his voice hoarse from shouting. The moment he saw her emerge from the smoke, his knees buckled. "Ava!" She ran into his arms, sobbing anew. The world collapsed around her again, but this time, with relief. Her father hugged her like he never intended to let go. Then he looked up. "Who brought you out?" Ava turned around. Walter was gone. The doorway behind her had caved in. Firefighters rushed past her, shouting, dragging hoses and oxygen tanks, while paramedics pulled her towards safety. But Walter wasn't there. "I was with an old man. He's blind. He knew the way out." Her father stared at her, stunned. "Blind?" She nodded. "He lived here once. He knew the stairs, the hallway, everything." A firefighter overheard. He paused. "This building's been condemned for years. Only person who ever lived on the second floor before it shut down was." He stopped. "What?" Ava asked. "Walter Fields, retired Navy officer. Went blind in his 60s. Refused to move out. Died 10 years ago. We pulled his body from that same stairwell." The words didn't make sense, not right away. Her father's grip on her tightened. "Are you sure it wasn't one of the crew?" "No," she whispered. "He held my hand. He told me his name." She didn't sleep that night. She couldn't stop replaying every moment. The warmth of Walter's hand, his confident steps, the way he counted stairs like he'd done it every day of his life. Her father sat beside her, silent, nursing a burn on his arm. Finally, he said, "Walter Fields saved dozens of people from fires during his time, including me. He was my commander in the Navy." Ava looked up, stunned. "I never told you that. I didn't know he'd lived here, though. I lost touch." She blinked. "You knew him?" "I owe him my life," he said, voice cracking. "Looks like you do too." The next morning, Ava returned to the ruins of the building. Charred wood, twisted metal. Nothing remained except one thing. Near where the stairwell had once stood, She found it. His cane blackened but whole, leaning gently against a beam, as if someone had placed it there with care. She touched it reverently, and for the first time since the fire, she smiled. In the weeks that followed, Ava couldn't stop thinking about Walter. She began researching him, digging into old records, Navy files, even a dusty box her father kept from his service days. What she discovered left her breathless. Walter had once pulled a young girl out of a collapsed submarine during a mission in 1967. He was celebrated, awarded, and yet he disappeared from the spotlight not long after losing his sight. He'd requested no funeral, no memorial, just that his belongings be given to the sea or the flames, as he wrote in his will. His son had died in a car crash, and his wife years before that. He'd lived alone, and he'd died alone. Until now. Ava started writing his story, at first, just for herself. But her father read it, then a local reporter. Then it went viral. The headline read, "Blind Man Saves Teen in Fire a Decade After His Death." People didn't believe it. They called it fantasy, hallucination, trauma-fueled nonsense. But firefighters started talking, sharing stories. A few remembered seeing a man like Walter in other rescues just for a flash, just in the corner of their eyes. They called him the Ghost Guide. Ava didn't care what people believed. She knew the truth. And every year, on the same day, she visited the spot where he'd disappeared, laying a single white rose beside his cane. "You weren't alone," she'd whisper. "Not anymore." The days passed, but Ava's thoughts stayed with Walter. She began dreaming about him, not nightmares, but vivid memories, as if her mind was replaying moments she had never lived. In those dreams, he was always calm, always steady, and always walking toward the fire instead of away from it. One afternoon, as she was helping her father clean out the garage, she found a dusty box tucked in the farthest corner. The words Navy W. Fields were scrawled in faded marker across the lid. Her father's hand hovered over it for a moment before opening it slowly, like it might collapse under the weight of old memories. Inside were medals, letters, photographs. One caught Ava's eye. It was a photo of her dad in uniform, standing beside a tall, broad-shouldered man with a confident smile and white hair beneath a navy cap. "That's him," Ava whispered. "That's Walter." Her father nodded. "He taught me everything. Taught all of us. But after he lost his sight, he didn't want help. Said he didn't need saving, just needed to remember." He paused, then added, "I think that building was all he had left." Ava swallowed the lump in her throat. He didn't seem angry or sad, just determined. That was Walter. He believed there was always a way out. You just had to feel it. Her father looked at her, then really looked at her. His voice softened. "I almost lost you. But you didn't," she said. "Because of him." The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was filled with understanding, with shared grief and gratitude. That night, Ava went online and posted Walter's picture alongside her story. She didn't care about fame or attention, she just wanted people to know, to remember. She wrote, "This man saved my life. I don't care what you believe. He was real. He held my hand. He walked me out of hell. His name was Walter Fields. If you know him, if you've heard his name, tell someone. Because heroes don't need eyes to see the way. They just need the heart to lead." The post spread faster than she expected. Comments flooded in. Some skeptical, some mocking, but others told stories of their own. One woman claimed she saw a man in a navy sweater pull her child from a ditch during a car accident, then vanish. Another said an old man with a blind cane appeared outside her burning trailer years ago, shouting for her to get out before the fire reached her bedroom. She'd always thought it was a neighbor, but after seeing Walter's photo, she wasn't so sure. And then came a message from a man named Elias, a firefighter from New Jersey. He wrote, "We had a warehouse fire in '09. We lost comms. Smoke everywhere. But a voice kept calling us, guiding us to an exit we didn't even know existed. I thought it was one of the guys. But when I saw your post, my heart stopped. That was the voice. That was the man." Ava showed her dad the message. His hands trembled as he read it. "He never stopped serving," he said quietly, "even after death." They decided to honor him properly. With the help of her father's fire department, Ava organized a small memorial on the anniversary of the fire. It wasn't grand, just a circle of candles, some framed photos, and the scorched cane she'd found at the ruins. But people came. Veterans, firefighters, strangers who had read her post and felt compelled to come. and each person had a story. Some spoke. Others just stood quietly, wiping tears or nodding in solidarity. A local reporter covered the gathering. The story made its way into national news, and eventually a documentary crew contacted Ava for an interview. She agreed, not to chase attention, but to preserve the memory of the man who had become more than a mystery, had become a guardian. In the interview, she said, "Walter didn't just save me. He reminded me that even when everything is dark, there's still light to follow. Sometimes, that light comes from someone who's walked through the fire before you, even if they can't see it anymore." When she finished speaking, the interviewer asked one final question. "Do you believe Walter was a ghost?" Ava thought about that. Then she shook her head. "No, I believe Walter was a promise. A promise that some people never stop helping, never stop guiding even when they're gone." That winter, Ava returned to school with a changed heart. She enrolled in emergency medical training and joined the junior rescue team. Her father watched with quiet pride, often sneaking peeks at her while she practiced first aid or trained with fire safety gear. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the snow fall, he said, "You've got that look." "What look?" "The same one Walter had. Like you're always watching the exits. Always listening." She smiled softly. "Maybe I am." And for a long time, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Because between them was something stronger than words, an invisible thread, woven by fire, memory, and a blind man's courage. And that thread would guide them, always. Spring crept in slowly that year, like the world itself was still recovering. Though the town had moved on, Ava hadn't. Not really. Something in her had shifted. Her mornings weren't about rushing anymore. She moved through the day with purpose, like Walter did in that smoke-filled building. She began visiting the local retirement center after school, not because someone told her to, but because she felt drawn to the place. The halls were quiet. The residents, often forgotten by their families, were reservoirs of stories and silence. That's where she met Mr. Harlan. He was 91, nearly deaf, and barely spoke above a whisper. But his eyes were sharp in a way that made Ava feel seen. She brought him puzzles, sat with him while he read the same 5 books over and over, and sometimes just held his hand while the sun poured through the window. One day, as she was helping him with his crossword, he said, "You've got a ghost in you." She blinked. "Excuse me." "A ghost. Not a haunting kind. The guiding kind." She smiled. "His name was Walter." Mr. Harlan paused, eyes narrowing. "Fields?" She froze. "Yes." Harlan leaned back, voice dropping. "I knew Walter. We served together for a short time. After Korea, he was a good man. Saw things none of us could explain." "You believe he helped me?" she asked. "I don't have to believe," he replied. "Walter's always been a guardian." He went quiet again, but something had clicked in Ava's heart. She started to wonder if maybe she wasn't the only one Walter had marked. Maybe there were others, people touched by him, shaped by him, walking through the world with that same silent courage. Ava created a small online forum. She called it The Ones He Touched. It was simple, just a place for people to share stories about unexpected guidance, rescues that defied logic, moments where it felt like someone invisible had stepped in. At first, it was quiet. But then, the stories came. A boy from Oregon who swore a man pulled him from a lake the night his car crashed through ice. A woman in Detroit who'd heard a voice guiding her during an apartment fire. "Count the steps. Stay low. Follow the wall." The exact words Walter had used with Ava. And over again, they described the same thing: a tall man. White hair. Navy sweater. A cane. It was no longer just a story, it was a movement. The media picked up the thread again. This time, it wasn't just about Ava's rescue. It was about a phenomenon. A pattern. People began calling Walter the Watcher in the smoke. Some scoffed. Others rolled their eyes. But Ava didn't care. Because truth didn't need belief. Truth lived in her heartbeat. In the memory of that trembling, smoke-choked moment when a blind old man had taken her hand and led her to safety. She could still feel how steady his grip was. How calm his voice had been. How he had known the building better than anyone alive. And so she kept the forum alive. Kept responding. Kept listening. Meanwhile, Ava's relationship with her father deepened. There were still scars, emotional and physical. He carried a long burn down his left shoulder that never fully healed. But more than the wound, there was the guilt. "I should have found you first," he said one night. "You were my daughter. You were alone. And I failed you. No, she said softly. You didn't. Walter was there. That's not failure. That's grace. They fell into a quiet routine. Dinners together, walks with their dog, late-night talks about old memories and new dreams. One night, as thunder cracked in the distance and rain lashed the windows, Ava asked, "Do you ever think he's still around?" Her father looked at her, then at the flickering candle on the table between them. "Sometimes," he said, "especially when I wake up from a nightmare and feel peace, like someone standing nearby." "I feel that too," she whispered. "Then he is," he said. "Somehow he is." The next summer, Ava received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, Walter, in uniform, standing with a group of Navy officers in front of a submarine. On the back, one sentence was scribbled in careful handwriting. His last mission wasn't in the ocean. It was in the fire. There was no signature, no explanation. But Ava didn't need one. She framed the photo and placed it above her desk, next to the cane. At school, her teachers noticed a change. Ava's essays brimmed with empathy. Her science reports shifted toward emergency response and neural pathways under extreme stress. Her art projects depicted scenes of fire, rescue, and unseen guardians. One day, her English teacher handed her back a short story with a single comment. "This feels real." Ava smiled. It was. That year, she gave a speech during a youth leadership conference. The auditorium was packed, hundreds of students, parents, educators. Her heart pounded as she stepped up to the mic. She took a breath and began. "We're taught that heroes wear uniforms, that they have sight, that they move fast and shout loud and kick down doors. But I met a hero who walked slowly, who couldn't see, who said very little, and who saved my life." The room was silent. His name was Walter Fields. And though he died 10 years before I met him, he found me in the fire and led me home. He didn't need eyes. He needed heart. That's what makes a hero. Not strength, not sight, but the willingness to walk back into the flames for someone who still needs saving. There was no applause at first, just a stillness, a reverence. Then, slowly, people rose to their feet. A standing ovation. Her father wept in the back row. And for the first time since the fire, Ava allowed herself to weep too. Later that night, as they drove home in silence, her father said, "I think you've finally made peace." She turned to look at him. "Maybe. Or maybe I've just begun something new." He nodded. Either way, Walter would be proud. Ava looked out the window at the stars scattered above. "Yeah," she said. "I think he already is." That fall, the fire department invited Ava to speak at their annual remembrance ceremony. She wore her best dress, her father's old badge pinned to her chest. She stood before rows of men and women in uniform, most of them strangers, all of them family. "I'm not here because I'm brave," she said. "I'm here because someone was brave for me." She paused, glancing at the back row where a space was left empty, just a single chair with a folded navy sweater draped over it. "I never got to thank him properly," she said. "So I'll keep trying every day." And then, quietly, she recited the words Walter had said to her, the ones she would never forget. "We can help each other." After the remembrance ceremony, Ava lingered in the firehouse kitchen, sipping cocoa that one of the older firefighters insisted on making for her. The room buzzed with quiet conversation. Some of the crew approached her, people who had heard her story before, others who hadn't. But all of them had something to say. "You reminded me why I signed up in the first place," said one young firefighter. Another older one, his face rough and weathered, placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Walter taught my captain. You look just like him when you speak. Calm, unshaken." But one story that evening stood out. A man named Chief Alton, retired, gray-bearded, with a cane much like Walter's, approached Ava while the crowd began to thin. "You got a second?" he asked. Ava nodded. "I met Walter once," he began. "Late 90s. There was a high-rise apartment fire. Worst I'd ever seen. We had a kid trapped on the 12th floor. Communications were down. I sent in 3 teams. None of them made it past the 10th. His eyes grew distant. And then this guy walks in off the street. No gear. Just a cane. Says he's got a route. Says he can lead someone up and back down. I was furious, thought he was suicidal. But the look in his eyes, he paused. I sent a rookie with him. Told him to keep the guy from doing anything stupid." He chuckled bitterly. 5 minutes later, the rookie radios and says he's with the kid. Says he's coming down. I waited outside like a fool thinking this is some miracle. And Ava asked, heart pounding. He came out holding the kid. No gear, no burns, just covered in soot. The rookie swore the old man had walked him through the stairwells in the dark like he had a map in his head. Was it Walter? She whispered. I didn't know until I saw your photo, Chief Alton said. That's him. That's the man. Ava felt a strange stillness settle over her, as if some thread had just knotted together, some piece of the puzzle finally fitting into place. Chief Alton went on. I tried to find him after that. Never could. Not in any database. But I'll never forget what he said when I asked how he knew the layout. He looked her straight in the eyes. He said, when you've walked enough dark halls, you learn to see with more than your eyes. Ava swallowed hard. It was exactly what Walter had said to her, almost word for word. She thanked the chief and walked out into the cool evening air, heart buzzing with warmth and wonder. That night, Ava couldn't sleep. She pulled out an old spiral notebook and wrote for hours. She didn't know what the story would become, a book, a collection, maybe just a journal for herself, but the words poured out of her like smoke from a window cracked open. She wrote about fear, about courage, about grief and legacy, and most of all, about unseen hands in our darkest moments. She titled the collection, The Fire Between Us. It was her way of honoring not just Walter, but everyone he touched, those who were rescued, those who listened, those who carried his voice without ever knowing him. Months passed. Ava graduated high school with honors and received a small scholarship from the fire department's community foundation. She used it to enroll in a first responder certification program, determined to earn her EMT license before turning 19. Her father was her biggest fan. You've already saved more lives than I ever did, he'd say, shaking his head proudly. But Ava didn't feel like a hero. Not yet. She still woke up some nights hearing the crackle of flames. Still reached for invisible hands in her dreams. Still whispered thanks to a man whose face was more familiar than her own. She visited the ruins of the building one last time before leaving for training. The lot had been cleared, fenced off, and sold to developers, but she stood outside the chain-link barrier and stared at the dirt. She could still see the stairwell, the smoke, the way Walter moved like he belonged in that place. Before leaving, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver dog tag. It had belonged to Walter. Her father had found it in one of his old boxes after the fire, etched with Walter's name and Navy ID. It had taken months of back and forth with archives and veteran services, but they'd confirmed it. Walter Fields had served with distinction, buried without honors, forgotten by most. Not anymore. Ava kissed the dog tag and dropped it gently into the soil between two bricks that had survived the blaze. Thank you, she whispered, for showing me the way. During training, Ava excelled. She wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but no one kept cooler under pressure. In every simulation, every drill, she was the one her teammates followed. You've got rescue in your blood, her instructor once told her. And maybe something more. Like you've already walked through fire. She smiled. She had. One afternoon, during a smoke maze exercise, her partner froze halfway through the darkened course. The dummy victim was 3 rooms away. The exit was blocked. Panic set in. Ava knelt beside her partner, took her hand, and whispered, "Follow me. I know the way." Later, when asked how she found the exit so fast, she said, "I just remembered how it felt to be led. And I listened." That night, she lit a candle by her bunk. "For you, Walter," she said, "still guiding me." By the end of that year, The Fire Between Us had been published independently online. The little collection of real stories, interviews, and reflections caught the attention of a nonprofit that worked with veterans and rescue workers. They contacted Ava with a proposal to create a scholarship in Walter's name for the children of first responders who had lost their lives in the line of duty. She cried when she read the email. The Walter Fields Courage Fund was born. Each year, it would help someone who had walked through their own fire, someone who needed a hand in the dark. And on the bottom of every acceptance letter, Ava made sure the same words were printed. We can help each other. 2 years later, Ava stood on the edge of another emergency scene, but this time, she wasn't the one being rescued. She was the rescuer. A 3-car collision on the interstate had left the road slick with gasoline and the air sharp with panic. She moved quickly, calmly, weaving through the mess with a med kit slung across her chest. Her partner, Miguel, shouted coordinates over the radio, while Ava crouched beside a trapped boy whose leg was pinned beneath crumpled metal. "Hey, buddy," she said gently. "Can you tell me your name?" "Eli," he whispered, tears streaking down his dust-covered cheeks. "Okay, Eli. I'm Ava. I'm going to stay with you. We're going to get you out." The flames from a nearby engine flickered brighter. A distant voice shouted, "Fuel leaks spreading." Ava didn't flinch. She reached into her pocket and rubbed the small metal coin she always carried stamped with Walter's initials, a gift from the fire department when the scholarship launched. It wasn't magic, but it reminded her of what mattered. Walter hadn't turned away. Neither would she. She looked Eli in the eye. "I want you to take a deep breath, okay? We're going to lift this off your leg on the count of 3. The child nodded. "Ready? 1, 2, 3. She and Miguel heaved the panel off just enough to pull Eli free. Ava swept him up in her arms and carried him away from the burning wreck, ignoring the shouts, the heat, the chaos behind her. They made it behind the safety line seconds before the car exploded in a roar of fire. Later that night, still wearing soot on her cheeks, she visited the hospital to check on Eli. His mother hugged her for so long she thought the woman might never let go. "You walked into fire for him," the mother said. Ava shook her head. "Someone once did it for me." That evening, Ava lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She hadn't spoken Walter's name in a while, not aloud. But tonight, she whispered, "You'd be proud, wouldn't you?" The room was still, but she felt it. That same peaceful hush that had wrapped around her outside the burning building all those years ago. The same warmth that had lingered beside her father's bed after his surgery. The same sense of someone standing just beyond the edge of sight, watching quietly, guiding. The forum the ones he touched had grown into a full website by now filled with user-submitted stories, digital archives, timelines of Walter's confirmed and rumored appearances. Ava worked with a tech-savvy volunteer to cross-reference rescue stories across the last 20 years. They found 26 that bore Walter's unmistakable fingerprints. Each told the same story in a different voice. A man with white hair, blind or nearly blind, appearing in moments of extreme danger. Calm, precise, gone by the time anyone could thank him. One submission came from a woman named Rosalie in Louisiana. "I was 8. There was a fire in our church. I was alone, hiding in a closet. I still remember the voice. He didn't open the door. He spoke through it. Said, 'It's safe now. I've got you.' When I stepped out, the fire had moved away from the hall. He held my hand and led me to the back stairs. When we got outside, he was gone." Another came from a firefighter in Canada. "Blind old man guided me out of a hotel collapse. Said his son died in one just like it. When I asked his name, he said it didn't matter, I'm just here to help someone else live." Every story added weight to the legend. But for Ava, it wasn't about proving he existed. It was about continuing what he'd started. On the 10th anniversary of the night she was saved, Ava stood again at the edge of that lot, now a small memorial park, thanks to city petitions and public support. The cane and the dog tag had been encased in glass at the center of the space, with a bronze plaque that read, "In memory of Walter Fields, a man who never stopped guiding, even when he could no longer see." She ran her fingers over the words, tears stinging her eyes. Her father stood beside her, older now, with a limp in his step and gray streaks in his beard. But his eyes hadn't changed. They still watched her like she was a miracle. "You've done good," he said quietly. He'd say the same. Ava didn't answer. She was watching a little boy run past the flowers with his sister, laughing, carefree. The world kept turning. Fires kept burning. People kept getting lost. But Ava wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. She knew the way. 2 weeks later, Ava received an invitation that caught her by surprise. The National Fire and Rescue Honors Council wanted to induct Walter Fields into their Hall of Heroes posthumously, based on the number of verified rescues tied to his name. They invited Ava to accept the honor on his behalf. She agreed without hesitation. The ceremony was held in Washington, D.C., and filled with decorated veterans, active responders, and Gold Star families. Ava stood on stage before hundreds of people, holding Walter's cane in her hands as if it were a torch. This man didn't wear a badge. He didn't carry a radio. Most days, he didn't even speak. But he saved more lives than some entire departments. Not because he had to. Because he chose to. Again and again. She swallowed hard. Walter walked blindly into danger because he trusted something more than Cy trusted love, compassion, purpose. A tear rolled down her cheek. I owe him my life, and so do others. And I hope, in the moments when you feel afraid, you remember him. And if you ever feel like giving up, just take someone's hand and lead. The crowd stood. 1,000 hands clapped. And in the silence that followed, Ava could almost hear Walter whispering, "We can help each other." When she returned home, there was one more surprise waiting for her. A letter. Not emailed. Not texted. A real letter mailed, yellowed with time. Inside was a faded photo of a young Walter holding a child in his arms. On the back were scrawled words in a hurried hand. "He saved me when I was just 3. I never knew his name until I read your story. Thank you. You gave my rescuer a name again." There was no sender's name, no return address, just a memory returned home. Ava framed the photo, placed it next to her mirror. Because Walter's story didn't end with fire. It began with every person who remembered. The final chapter of Walter's story, at least in the way Ava could tell it, began not with fire, but with quiet. She had just finished a shift at the hospital. It was late. Rain tapped gently against the windows as she sat by her desk, sipping cold tea and reading over a patient report. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "He saved my grandfather too. I'd like to meet you." Attached was a photo. It showed an elderly man in a hospital bed, smiling, holding a folded navy sweater in his lap. The message came from his granddaughter, Lily, a young woman who'd read Ava's book and recognized Walter from her grandfather's stories. Her grandfather had been pulled from a house fire as a child. No firefighters had been nearby, but someone had carried him out, a man who left behind only a whisper and a cane. Ava met Lily at a small cafe in a quiet corner of town. They spoke for hours. About Walter. About legacy. About what it meant to carry someone's story forward. "I used to think it was made up," Lily admitted. "A childhood fantasy. But when I saw your book, your forum, I realized all these people can't be imagining the same man." "They're not," Ava said simply. Lily smiled. "Then maybe people like Walter don't die the way others do. Maybe they become part of something bigger." Ava nodded. "I like to think he became the fire that doesn't burn. The voice that calls you home." After that conversation, Ava made a decision. Walter's story didn't just belong to her anymore. It belonged to the world. She spent the next year developing an educational initiative called Project Walter, a nationwide curriculum in partnership with fire departments and schools, aimed at teaching students courage, empathy, and practical safety skills through storytelling. The program combined real rescue techniques with emotional lessons: how to lead, how to listen, how to trust even when afraid, how to be the hand that guides. The response was overwhelming. Districts across the country implemented Project Walter as part of their middle and high school programs. Students wrote essays about the person I want to be in the fire. Some drew pictures of a tall man with a cane and a calm smile, helping people through burning doors. One child even wrote, "If I ever get lost, I hope someone like Walter finds me." Ava kept that letter in her wallet. Everywhere she went, people stopped her not because she was famous, but because Walter had become someone they knew. And yet, in all of this, Ava still felt closest to him in the quiet. She began walking every evening through back alleys, around the firehouse, past the rebuilt park. Some nights, she swore she heard his cane tapping behind her, just for a second, just enough to make her turn. But no one was ever there. Still, she smiled, because she knew he was. On the 15th anniversary of the fire, Ava stood once more in front of a new group of recruits, fresh faces, clean uniforms, bright eyes. "Fear," she told them, "is not your enemy. It's your compass. It tells you where people need help the most." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "And when you're in the dark, when you can't see the exit, when your voice is all you've got, remember that someone may be listening. Someone may be waiting to follow your lead. So speak, move, and never assume you're alone." After the ceremony, one of the recruits approached her, a teenage girl with a nervous smile. "I don't know if I'm brave enough," she confessed. Ava gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't need to be fearless," she said. "You just need to be willing." Then she handed the girl a small card with a simple phrase printed on it. "We can help each other." Years passed. Ava married, had a daughter, named her Wren, in honor of Walter, who, like a small bird, had appeared from the smoke and carried her heart away with him. She read her daughter stories at bedtime, But one story remained sacred Walter's. It was Wren's favorite. She would sit up in bed, eyes wide, whispering, "Tell me about the blind man who saw everything." Ava never refused. Even when Wren was old enough to roll her eyes, even when other stories came and went, that story stayed. Because it wasn't just bedtime. It was legacy. One summer evening, Ava visited the memorial park alone, now older, her hair beginning to streak with gray. She sat on the bench beside the plaque and closed her eyes. The wind was gentle. The world was quiet. She whispered, "It's been a long time." No answer came, and yet she didn't feel alone. She opened her eyes and saw a young boy across the lawn, standing near the glass-encased cane, staring. His parents were a few feet behind, chatting. The boy's gaze was locked in awe. Ava stood, walked to him. "Do you know who that belongs to?" she asked softly. The boy looked up. "Kind of. My teacher told us he helped people during fires, even when he was blind." "That's right," Ava said. "He helped me once, too." The boy thought for a moment. "I want to be like him." Ava smiled. "Then you already are." Back at home that night, Ava pulled out an old folder from her bookshelf. Inside was the very first letter she'd written about Walter right after the fire, when she still had ash in her lungs and questions in her heart. She read it aloud, just once, for herself. Then she added one final line to the bottom. "Your story ends only when people stop remembering. I promise I never will." She placed it back inside the folder, now marked with a single word. Legacy. Epilogue. 25 years later. A new girl sat at the edge of a smoky hallway, crying. The flames around her hissed with hunger. She was barely 13, hiding under a desk, lost in a building that should have been safe. Until she heard a voice. Old. Gentle. "Take my hand. I know the way." She didn't question it. She grabbed hold. And followed. They moved through the smoke together, his cane tapping, his steps sure. At the door, he let go of her hand and whispered, "You'll be okay now." By the time the firefighters arrived, she was standing alone on the sidewalk, coughing, but safe. They asked her who helped her. She described him. And one of the older firemen, hearing her story, looked down with a knowing smile. "Walter," he whispered. The girl blinked. "You know him?" The fireman chuckled softly. "We all do." The end.